Zuma van Tilburg for BizNews. Well, members of Parliament's Rules Subcommittee have just returned from a trip to the United Kingdom, which was organised to observe how British parliamentarians enhance oversight over their head of government. Well, in their case, it's of course the Prime Minister. Well, the Presidency in South Africa is the only government portfolio that can't be actively interrogated and scrutinised by a parliamentary committee. And we have the member of that subcommittee in the BizNews studio, Corne Mulder, the Chief Whip of the Freedom Front Plus, who has just returned from Westminster in London. Hi, Corne, how are you?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you. It was an interesting visit. It's always good to be at Westminster and to see how these things operate, but it's always good to be back home as well.
So what prompted this visit?
It's interesting. The fact is that if you look at the Constitution in South Africa, Section 1 that deals with the founding provisions, makes provision that our democracy should be based on certain values, and some of them that are referred to in Section 1D of the Constitution would be accountability, responsiveness, and openness. So we've got a culture in South African system basically since 1994, in terms of which we want to do oversight, we need accountability, etc. But the problem was that, as you correctly pointed out, since 1994 until today, there's no specific committee tasked in Parliament to deal with accountability of vote 1, the vote of the President. And many opposition parties over the years tried to get that situation rectified, and we pushed for amendments and changes there. And luckily, it seems that we are now at the point where the ANC accepts that. And because of that, this delegation was sent to the British Parliament and to see how the British Parliament deals with this issue.
Well, before we get to what you saw there, didn't Zondo also recommend that there should be more oversight over the President?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely so. Zondo exactly said that should be the case. And another reason why it's very important is this. When we started off in 94, the Presidency was basically just technically the Presidency dealing with the President himself. But over the years, that office has increased year after year with more functions and more appointees, and the minister in the Presidency and a deputy minister. And at the moment, we've got all kinds of so-called commissions in the Presidency, Commission on Environmental Affairs, all kinds of people being appointed. But there's no oversight over that portfolio, and it's become a huge problem.
Yeah, because President Ramaphosa also, as you said, there's an energy minister. So don't they have any scrutiny? People like the energy minister?
Exactly. No, it's a huge problem, and I'm very thankful that it seems that the ANC at last realizes that that's a problem, and we welcome that reality and that change. We will now have to go through the process and see how we can take that further. It could be that the ANC has now suddenly seen the light, or it could be that the ANC suspects there may be different presidents in the near future, and then they will like to do some oversight over them. We don't know.
Well, it seems the ANC has been slow marching this process. So, yeah, there seems to be a change of heart. So what did you find? Because there were some ANC members in that delegation.
Yes, the delegation consisted basically of 6 senior members of Parliament, all members of the subcommittee of the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee is under the chairpersonship of the Speaker herself. So it's a rather senior committee in Parliament. We were 3 members from the opposition and 3 senior members from the ANC. So it was a very balanced delegation of senior people. And we were also accompanied by 4 senior officials from Parliament. So it was a high-level visit. We had a very hectic program, but it was well organized, and we were very well received. And we did have the opportunity to engage with colleagues in Westminster and to see and to explain and to hear from them firsthand how they do oversight in the British system, specifically over the office of the Prime Minister, being the head of state technically in the British system.
And what kind of oversights do they have?
Well, they've got basically 2 things that they mainly use. There are some more. The first one, obviously, is questions to the Prime Minister. Now, that is a very effective means of doing this kind of oversight, but it's very different from what we've got in South Africa. Questions to the Prime Minister in the British system happens every week on a Wednesday for about half an hour, and it's a spontaneous interaction. The Prime Minister is not given any indication beforehand which kind of questions will be asked that he could really prepare. He needs to be prepared across the whole spectrum of what may come up. The South African system is completely different. We've got questions to the President once a term, so that is about every three months there's an opportunity for that. And then you have to submit your questions about 14 days before question time in writing. And then you can just imagine first the question must be accepted, that it's okay. And then obviously the officials can go and process that and give the president a written reply. So it's completely different. I would love to see our situation where you've got a president or a prime minister, as in the British case, who can think on his feet and can handle that. So that's the one point. The second part is that in the UK system, there's a specific committee. They've got select committees where we talk about our portfolio committees. And their select committees are for each and every portfolio, for each and every ministry, there's a select committee. But then they've got what they call a liaison committee, and the liaison committee consists of the chairpersons of all the different select committees. So you've got a very senior committee in the liaison committee, with all the chairpersons of the different select committees attending there. And it's under the chairpersonship of, let me just quickly find that again, Sir Bernard Jenkins. We met him there, and we had a very good discussion with him. He's a very senior guy in Parliament as well. The difference is that in the British system, the chairpersons of the select committees are not from the ruling party alone. They are on a proportional basis representative of the different parties elected to Parliament. So there's a number of them coming from the Labour Party at the moment, from the Lib Dems, etc. So if we would just transplant that into our system, it will not suffice, because all our chairpersons are from the ruling ANC at the moment, except one. That is Impact, which is from an opposition party. So first of all, we will have to change our chairpersonships of our portfolio committees. But it's a very interesting mechanism, because you've got the chairpersons there, each one being an expert on his field of expertise, be that health, be that education, be that kind of different approach. So the Prime Minister is then 3 or 4 times a year brought in front of this committee, and they can ask him whatever they ask in terms of policy, in terms of financial things, etc., etc. So it's a very thorough method of doing oversight. And I just hope that I think we've learned quite a number of good lessons there. And I think when I spoke to the colleagues afterwards, I think we're on the same page to a very large extent. We will now come back and we need to draft the report, and then we'll take the process further.
So generally, don't you think there's enough methods to rein in the government? In other words, you elect him, and 5 years later, you can maybe get a choice again.
Unfortunately, no, not good enough. The problem is that one expects that you've got a very well-informed electorate out there. And that is not the case, unfortunately, anymore. Many people don't even bother to register, or they don't bother to go and vote in any case, which is a huge problem, a huge mistake. So you really need, as I think Margaret Thatcher once put it, there's no such thing as government money. Government doesn't have money. It's taxpayers' money that they spent. And it's absolutely essential that the mechanisms exist to keep them to account in terms of how they spend those monies, and also in terms of policy, and to make sure that the government, whoever they may be, govern in the best interest of the electorate out there.
So if the ANC now accepts it, how does it become practice? Is it a law? Does the constitution need to be changed?
No, luckily not. It will be a change to the rules of Parliament. So what will happen now is we hope to have a report, a first draft report within 7 days, which is imminent. And then we will go through that report as a committee and see if we are on the same page and make the necessary amendments. And once we are happy with that report, we will adopt it in the subcommittee. That will go then to the Rules Committee. And if it's adopted there, it becomes part of the rules and it will be implemented. So it's not a very difficult process. If the political will exists, it can be done rather quickly.
So what can we expect then to see, Mr. Ramaphosa at the moment, or whoever the president is, facing weekly questions? Because the debates in Britain is very robust, those weekly.
Absolutely. I think it's unlikely that the ANC will agree to that kind of interaction in terms of the question time. They don't like the idea. They don't want the president to be vulnerable in that sense. And that may be a bridge too far for the ANC, I believe. But the fact that we will create some kind of oversight mechanism, at the moment it doesn't exist, nothing whatsoever. So we will be able to create some kind of oversight mechanism, some kind of committee. The composition of that committee may still need to be discussed, because in our instance, if we want to use the chairpersons, we will first have to change the rules in terms of that as well, which will be a good thing. So that it will be to the best interest of Parliament if you can have chairpersons coming from the different parties in Parliament and give different parties the opportunity to play that kind of role. If the ANC is prepared to do that, we will know soon. And if not, then we'll have to find another mechanism to keep the president account. It can be implemented quite quickly, I think. I believe so. And if it's not done now, it will definitely be in time for, I believe, for the next term after the election of next year in any case.
So apart from the fact that you've been thinking for a long time that the president doesn't have proper oversight, is it the Zuma era that prompted Judge Zondo to say, this is not good enough?
Absolutely so. It was basically during the Zuma presidency when it became quite obvious that there are huge problems, and the whole state capture that was allowed under those pretenses and what happened there made Zondo Commission to express themselves and to say, well, we need to have some kind of oversight. But if you look in terms of what the Constitution basically says, it's unthinkable from day one that you can have the office of the presidency where millions of taxpayers' money is being spent without any real oversight. It's just unthinkable.
So what do we have now? Is it when you have the budget vote in Parliament and when the president speaks once a year, once a term? What is it when you have speeches from the opposition? Is it just by basically talking into the wind? In other words, it's opinions.
Absolutely. There's no specific committee of Parliament currently that interacts with that budget, that can scrutinize the budget, that can call officials from the presidency or can call the president himself to come and explain himself in front of a committee of Parliament. At the moment, it doesn't exist. So what happens with that budget vote at the moment is there's a debate in Parliament. The president speaks, he gives his views on a couple of things. Political parties express themselves. That's the end of it, and the ANC uses their majority to approve the budget. And that cannot continue.
So is an argument against what you're proposing now to say that, but we've got a federal system, we don't have the Westminster system anymore, it can't work in South Africa?
Well, it's true to a certain extent, but on the other hand, I saw that in action last week in UK specifically. Although we are no longer a Westminster kind of parliamentary system, we've got so many conventions and things that have developed out of that system that are still part and parcel of the South African constitutional dispensation, that our roots, our foundation basically still comes from the Westminster system. And then obviously there are certain things that are universal in terms of accountability, in terms of openness, in terms of transparency. And we can learn all those lessons definitely.
Well, Corne Mulder, Chief Whip from the Freedom Front Plus, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That's a pleasure.